Hello, welcome to the Tales from the Dark Corridor. Make sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to put into the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the stories. I told myself I was prepared when I stepped off the trailhead and into the Absaroka-Beartooth wilderness. I had a satellite communicator clipped to my pack, a 44 revolver I hoped I wouldn't need, and years of backcountry experience behind me. My name is Mike Davis, and I've hiked Montana's high country my entire adult life. That confidence would become the most dangerous thing I carried. The first day passed quietly, almost reverently. Granite peaks rose like broken teeth against a clean blue sky, snowfields clinging stubbornly to shaded bowls even in midsummer. The air was thin and cold enough to sting my lungs, but I welcomed it. I crossed creeks fed by distant glaciers and followed game trails where elk tracks pressed deep into the mud. Everything felt ancient out there, older than maps, older than names. That sense of age settled into me as the light thinned and shadows stretched long across the valleys. I made camp near a tree line just below a cirque, choosing a spot that gave me a wide view of the basin. As dusk fell, the wilderness grew unnaturally quiet. Not peaceful, empty, no birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if listening. I remember standing there with my stove half lit, suddenly aware of how exposed I was, how small. I shook it off and blamed altitude nerves. That was my first mistake. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of footsteps. At first, I thought it was wind pushing branches, but there was weight to it, slow, deliberate pressure against the ground. The steps circled my campsite, staying just beyond the firelight's reach. I froze inside my sleeping bag, heart hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. I whispered out, "Hey," my voice thin and useless. The footsteps stopped. Something exhaled, not a breath like an animal's snort or a bear's huff, but long and controlled, as if whatever was out there knew exactly how loud it wanted to be. I didn't sleep after that. Morning came pale and sickly, the sky smeared with low gray cloud. I found prints around my camp, deep impressions sunk into the soil near the tree line. They were wrong, too long, too wide. 5 toes spread unnaturally far apart, pressed into the mud like someone had walked barefoot with 100 extra pounds on their back. I stood there staring, trying to rationalize it. Deformed bear? Some kind of prank? But no bear walks heel to toe. No human leaves impressions like that. I broke camp early and pushed deeper into the wilderness, telling myself movement was safety. The trail narrowed into nothing more than a suggestion through deadfall and scree. By noon, the feeling of being watched returned. Not imagined, not paranoia. It was the kind of certainty that settles in your gut without explanation. I would stop, and a second later, something would stop too. Far off, hidden, but responding to me. The first vocalization came in the afternoon. It rolled through the basin like thunder trapped inside a throat. Low, powerful, layered with something almost human. The sound vibrated through my chest and made my vision blur. Birds erupted from the trees in a panicked cloud. I dropped to one knee, revolver halfway out of its holster, knowing instinctively how useless it would be. Whatever made that sound wasn't warning me off. It was announcing itself. I started running. That was when it began to follow openly. Branches snapped behind me, heavy and wet, as if entire limbs were being shoved aside without care. I caught glimpses between the trees, dark movement far taller than any man, moving with terrifying efficiency, not charging, herding. Every time I veered downhill or toward open ground, the movement shifted to cut me off. It knew the terrain better than I did. It knew me. By the time I reached a narrow ravine carved by snowmelt, my legs were shaking uncontrollably. I slipped more than once, skinning my palms on rock. The smell hit me then, wet fur, old rot, and something metallic beneath it, like blood soaked into leather. I heard it breathe again, closer now, the sound deep and measured, patient. I didn't see it clearly until I reached the ravine's dead end. It stood on the opposite slope, partially obscured by mist rising from the creek. 7, maybe 8 feet tall. broad shoulders matted with dark hair, clotted with mud and debris. Its arms were too long, hands hanging past its knees, fingers flexing slowly as if testing the air. Its face, God help me, was wrong. Flat and heavy-browed, eyes set too close together, reflecting no light. When it looked at me, I felt something press against my thoughts, not words but intent. It wasn't curious. It wasn't angry. It was deciding. I fired once. The shot cracked the air and echoed uselessly off the stone walls. The creature didn't flinch. Instead, it tilted its head and made a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. A broken mimicry of my own voice calling out earlier, twisted and dragged through a throat that had never been meant to speak. That was when I ran again, scrambling up the ravine wall, tearing my pack open on jagged rock. My satellite communicator bounced free and skidded down the slope. I almost left it. Almost. Something slammed into the rock below me, shaking the ground so hard I lost my grip and slid 10 feet, slamming into a ledge. Pain flared white-hot through my ribs. I grabbed the communicator and triggered the SOS with shaking fingers. The thing roared then, not from rage but frustration. It lunged, and for a moment I thought it would reach me. Instead, it stopped just short of the ledge, staring up at me with those dark, depthless eyes. Its lips pulled back, not into a snarl, but into something that might have been a smile. It waited. Hours passed. Cold rain began to fall, soaking me through. I huddled on that ledge, barely daring to breathe. The creature never left. Sometimes it moved out of sight, only to reappear closer. Sometimes it threw rocks, not to hit me, but to remind me it could. At one point, it reached down into the creek and lifted a boulder the size of a cooler, rolling it in its hands like a toy before letting it crash into the water below. Night fell again, and with it came the cold. I started hallucinating from pain and exposure. I thought I heard voices, rescue crews, my brother. My own thoughts turned against me. Through it all, the presence remained, constant, pressing, as if it knew help was coming and wanted me to understand how close I had come to disappearing forever. The helicopter arrived just before dawn. The sound of the rotors shattered the silence, echoing wildly through the ravine. The creature reacted instantly, stepping back into the trees with surprising speed. Before it vanished completely, it looked at me one last time. Not with anger, with recognition, as if memorizing me. Hands grabbed me from the air as the hoist lowered. I don't remember screaming, but I must have. I remember clinging to the rescuer like a child, sobbing into his shoulder as we lifted away from the ledge. Below us, the forest swallowed everything. No sign, no tracks visible from above, just endless green and stone. They told me later that weather closed in minutes after extraction, that if the helicopter had been delayed even half an hour, they wouldn't have been able to reach me. They asked about bears, about injuries, about dehydration. I answered none of it. I just stared out the window at the receding peaks, waiting to see movement that never came. I don't hike alone anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I wake up convinced I hear footsteps circling my house. Slow, heavy, patient. And I know, deep in the part of me that still belongs to that wilderness, that whatever watched me from the trees didn't lose interest. It let me go, and I don't know why that frightens me more. I tried to convince myself that what happened in the Absaroka-Beartooth wilderness was over the moment the helicopter carried me out. That belief lasted exactly 3 days. I was discharged from the hospital in Billings with cracked ribs, hypothermia scars, and a diagnosis that hovered uncomfortably between acute stress reaction and you should probably talk to someone. I didn't. I drove home instead, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, flinching at every dark stand of trees along the highway. The doctors told me trauma likes to echo. I didn't need them to explain it. I could feel the echo already, vibrating beneath my thoughts like something pacing behind thin walls. The first night back in my house, I slept with every light on. The second night, I woke at 2:11 a.m. to the sound of wood knocking against wood. It was slow, intentional. 3 hollow thumps spaced evenly apart. I lay in bed, heart hammering, staring at the ceiling while my brain did everything it could to rationalize the noise. Wind, a loose branch, someone's fence down the road. Then it came again, closer this time. Not against the house, against the tree line behind it, the same measured rhythm I'd heard circling my tent. I didn't look out the window. Morning brought no relief. I found footprints in the soft dirt near the back fence, partially obscured as if whoever, or whatever, made them hadn't wanted to leave a clear trail. Too long, too deep, 5 toes. I stood there for a long time before the cold realization settled in. I wasn't being followed. I was being checked on. I took leave from work, telling my boss I needed time to recover. That was true, just not in the way he understood. I spent hours poring over satellite images, topo maps, anything that might help me make sense of what I'd encountered. The Absaroka-Beartooth isn't just wilderness. It's a fractured labyrinth of dead zones, places where GPS glitches and radio signals bend unpredictably. Indigenous stories spoke of the Watchers, things that didn't belong to any one place but guarded thresholds between them. I told myself that was folklore. Then my satellite communicator arrived in the mail. It was the same one I dropped in the ravine. Same serial number, same cracked casing, no return address, no note. I threw it in the trash. By nightfall, it was back on my kitchen counter. That was when the dream started changing. At first, I relived the ravine, the ledge, the cold, the waiting. But slowly, the details shifted. In the dreams, I didn't stay put. I climbed down. I stood in front of the thing. Sometimes it reached out. Sometimes it spoke. Not in words, but impressions. Images of valleys I didn't recognize. Of stars wheeling in unfamiliar patterns. Of people walking into forests and never walking back. I woke each time with the same certainty pressing into my skull. It had let me go because I wasn't finished. I tried running. I packed my truck and drove east, then south, avoiding mountains, avoiding trees. The knocking followed me. Motel walls vibrated with it at night. Forest silhouettes appeared where none should have been. Once, on a flat stretch of highway in Nebraska, I saw a shape pacing my headlights just beyond the beam, matching my speed for miles before veering off into open farmland that couldn't possibly hide something that large. I finally broke down and contacted a search and rescue coordinator I knew from Montana. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. Enough to sound unhinged without sounding delusional. There was a long pause on the line before he spoke again, voice lower. "You weren't the first extraction from that area," he said. "Just the first who talked." That was how I ended up back in Montana. We didn't go into the Absaroka-Beartooth this time. We staged near it at a decommissioned ranger outpost slated for demolition. 4 of us total, me, the coordinator, a wildlife biologist who wouldn't meet my eyes, and a tribal liaison who carried no visible gear and asked no unnecessary questions. Night fell early beneath heavy cloud cover, the forest pressing close even where it shouldn't have been. I felt it before I saw it. The pressure returned heavier than before, like the air itself was thickening. The knocking echoed once, twice, and then stopped. Something moved beyond the tree line, not hiding, not advancing, waiting. The liaison finally spoke. "It marked you," he said quietly, "not as prey, as proof." The word landed wrong. Proof of what? The answer came when the forest opened. It didn't charge. It didn't roar. It stepped into the clearing with the inevitability of a tide, massive and deliberate, its dark eyes reflecting the lantern light without warmth. Behind it, the trees bent inward, shadows stretching unnaturally long, forming shapes that made my vision ache. I realized with sudden clarity that the creature wasn't alone. It never had been. This wasn't an animal. It was a boundary. The biologist ran first. He didn't make it 10 steps before the darkness behind the thing surged forward, swallowing him without sound. No struggle, no scream, just absence. The coordinator froze, mouth open in a silent plea that never formed. I don't remember drawing my revolver. I remember the liaison placing a hand on my arm instead. "Not like this," he said. The creature turned its head toward me. Recognition flared again. Not hostility, not mercy. Expectation. Images flooded my mind. The ravine, the helicopter, the road east, the knocking at my fence. I understood then. It hadn't followed me out of the wilderness. I had brought the wilderness with me. The liaison stepped forward and began to chant, low and rhythmic, the words folding into the night like smoke. The forest groaned in response. The creature hesitated, its outline wavering, shadows pulling at it from behind. For the first time, I sensed resistance, something pushing back from the other side. The creature looked at me one last time. This time, I understood the message clearly. Survivors are witnesses. Then it stepped backward into the trees and the forest seals shut behind it like a wound closing. We left at dawn. No one spoke of the missing biologist. There would be paperwork. There always was. I was told to go home, to forget. The liaison lingered long enough to meet my eyes. "It won't come again," he said. "Not for you." I wanted to believe him. Months have passed. The knocking has stopped. The dreams have faded. I live far from the mountains now, surrounded by concrete and noise and light. People think that's safety. They're wrong, because sometimes when the city goes quiet in the hours before dawn, I feel that pressure again. Not close, not immediate, but present. Watching, waiting. And I know that somewhere, deep in the wilderness where maps lose their meaning, something remembers me. Not as prey, as evidence.